In my final lecture this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about what anthropology is as a discipline and what qualitative research is. Anthropology is a very broad discipline, which we can think of as the holistic study of humans, their societies, and behaviors, past, present, and future. By holistic, we mean that anthropologists and anthropological researchers do our best to think about and study all of the different elements that affect human societies. Now, this is a very broad subject, so anthropology is broken down generally into these four fields: sociocultural, archaeological, linguistic, and biological. This class is primarily a social or cultural anthropology class, but I'll briefly go through each of the other three disciplines as well. Archaeology involves the study of material culture, which is just a fancy way of saying stuff, left by people who are no longer alive. Archaeologists study human culture and behavior, but they primarily do so by studying the things that people left behind, that they find and excavate. Biological anthropologists may study the physical remains of human primate ancestors, such as Australopithecus or Neanderthals, or they might study the remains of modern humans to assist with things like forensics or criminology. Linguistic anthropologists study the way people use language. But let's get back to social and cultural anthropology, which refers to the holistic study of contemporary human societies and culture. I also wanted to offer a brief history of anthropology as a discipline. Like many social sciences, anthropology has a deeply disturbing history, steeped in colonialism and racism. The earliest anthropologists in the mid-19th century were often members of invasive and oppressive colonial regimes that traveled from Europe to extract people and resources from other parts of the country. Others were what we call armchair anthropologists, who didn't go anywhere, but read or listened to reports of people who participated directly in colonization and wrote about different societies that way. Anthropologists were also heavily involved in eugenics and other racist systems that attempted to classify certain types or characteristics of people as better or worse than others. Other anthropologists, including Franz Boas, Margaret Mead, Zora Neale Hurston, and Ruth Benedict, actively participated in efforts to challenge the use of eugenics in places like Nazi Germany and promoted anti-racism in the civil rights movement, anti-apartheid movement, and others. Historically, though, anthropology has been the study of societies by outsiders. Anthropologists would leave their own communities and societies and travel thousands of miles to study societies that they often perceive to be very different from their own. However, particularly since the 1980s, there's been a greater push within the discipline of anthropology to de-emphasize the study of difference and instead focus primarily on how and why societies function the way that they do, which is often helped by having research led by insiders and not outsiders. Today, anthropologists work as teachers, as researchers, in public policy, public safety, and even in product development and marketing. If any of you have ever heard of Go-Gurt, the yogurt in the tube, that was developed and promoted by a corporate anthropologist. Now, let's get to the type of research that anthropologists do. This is broadly called qualitative research, which seeks to understand the whys of society, why something happens the way it does, often through in-depth interviews, intensive observation, and first-hand participation. I don't want to say that qualitative research is in contrast to quantitative research, because they often complement each other, but they are different. Quantitative research uses numerical measurements, mathematical models, and statistical findings to analyze data across a large and often generalizable population. While quantitative researchers may gather small amounts of research data from thousands of participants, qualitative researchers gather a large amount of information from a relatively smaller number of participants to answer more complex why questions. In my own research, I look at why people in England hold certain political beliefs around the issue of Brexit. A quantitative researcher could use numerical polling data to tell me what percentage of people supported Brexit. However, they couldn't use that research to tell me why those people supported Brexit. To do that, I spent several months living among people who supported Brexit, going to meetings and social events with them, and observing how they talked about politics in their country. I also spent hundreds of hours interviewing people about their beliefs and backgrounds that contributed to their political beliefs. That's a form of qualitative research. Sociocultural anthropologists use qualitative research to study the impact of those social forces that we've been talking about on people's lived experiences. We use a variety of methods to carry out qualitative research, including participant observation, going out and being among people, doing what they do, seeing what they see, hearing what they hear. In-depth interviews that ask open-ended questions about why people hold certain beliefs, practice certain behaviors, or many other things. We may carry out focus groups in which we interview multiple people together and observe them speaking to one another. We collect some survey work and do secondary research to help inform our understandings. For your second group project, each of you is going to be interviewing at least one person on the topic that your group chooses. There'll be another lecture video about interviews, but I wanted to begin talking about the interview as part of qualitative research here today. Rather than a quote for this final lecture video this week, I wanted to close on this exceptional cartoon, and because cartoons are always funnier when someone explains them to you, this cartoon pokes fun at classic anthropological research in which outsiders, the people outside the window here, arrive to study a society that they assume to be very different from their own. However, just before the anthropologists arrive, their intended subjects are hiding the objects in their lives that would in fact make them seem very similar to the anthropologists themselves. We're very funny as a discipline. Alright, thank you for watching all 3 lecture videos. The lecture quiz should be open to you now.